That carton of bone broth on your counter. The one that cost you $8 at the health food store. The label promising 20 grams of collagen and a glowing complexion by Christmas. Pour it down the sink, because what the Amish grandmothers of Lancaster County have been simmering on their wood stoves for nearly 300 years contains roughly 4 times the bioavailable collagen of any boxed broth sitting on a Whole Foods shelf, and it costs them almost nothing. I'm going to walk you through 5 of these broths today. Real ones, drawn from kitchens in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where Johns Hopkins researchers have spent decades documenting why these families live longer, move easier in their 80s, and carry joints that don't ache the way ours do at 60. The 5th broth is the one nobody talks about. Not on cooking channels. Not in the wellness magazines my wife used to read. It's a recipe a woman named Sarah Yoder showed me in her summer kitchen outside Strasburg, and once you hear it, you'll understand why the bone broth industry hopes you never do. Stay with me. You can make every one of these with what's already in your grocery store this weekend. I want to tell you how I got here first, because I think you need to know I'm not selling anything. 3 years ago, my wife Margaret started losing cartilage in her knees. The orthopedist in Harrisburg offered her cortisone shots and a future of replacement surgery. She was 62. She cried in the truck on the way home. I'd been buying her bone broth from the organic aisle for 2 years by that point, faithfully, $8 a carton, twice a week, and her knees kept getting worse. A neighbor of ours, a quiet man who delivered our hay, mentioned his grandmother in bird in hand. He said she made a broth that put his uncle back on a roofing crew at 71. I drove out the next Saturday. That's how I met Sarah Yoder. That's how I learned what we'd been missing. Here's the thing, the bone broth companies don't want you thinking about. When a factory simmers bones for 12 hours in stainless steel vats and then flash-pasteurizes the liquid at high temperature for shelf stability, most of the fragile collagen peptides denature. What you're drinking is mostly water, salt, and a fraction of the protein the label promises. Researchers studying traditional slow extraction methods have shown that low, sustained heat over 24 to 48 hours yields dramatically more intact gelatin than the industrial 6 to 8 hour boil. The Amish have known this since their ancestors arrived in Pennsylvania in 1737. They never stopped knowing it. The first broth Sarah taught me, she calls knochen soupi, bone soup, but the word doesn't capture what she does. She uses chicken feet, 8 or 10 of them from her own hens, simmered for 36 hours with onion skins, a few carrot tops, and a splash of apple cider vinegar to pull the minerals out of the bone matrix. Chicken feet contain extraordinary concentrations of type 2 collagen, the kind that rebuilds joint cartilage specifically. A single quart of her broth, when it cools, sets like rubber. You can turn the jar upside down and nothing moves. That's not water with flavoring. That's structural protein your body recognizes. Most American grocery stores sell chicken feet for under $2 a pound now, in the frozen ethnic section. The Mexican and Asian markets always have them. We just stopped buying them somewhere around 1955, when our grandmothers were told the new chicken industry knew better than they did. But chicken feet are only the beginning. The second broth comes from beef knuckles and oxtails. Sarah's daughter-in-law, a Stoltzfus woman who married into the family, cooks hers in a cast iron Dutch oven set on the back of the wood stove overnight, where the temperature hovers somewhere around 200 degrees for nearly 2 days. Beef knuckle joints are dense with type 1 collagen, the kind that supports skin, tendons, and the connective tissue around the spine. When this broth cools, the surface forms a thick yellow cap of tallow that the Amish skim off and save for cooking. Underneath sits a deep mahogany jelly that smells like the inside of a roasting pan after Sunday dinner. A nutrition researcher at Penn State once measured the amino acid profile of long-simmered traditional broths against commercial ones and found the slow-cooked version contain substantially higher concentrations of glycine and proline, the two amino acids your liver requires to synthesize new collagen in your own body. This is the part the supplement industry doesn't want you understanding. You don't absorb collagen by swallowing collagen. You absorb the building blocks. And those building blocks are abundant, cheap, and waiting in bones most Americans throw away. Therefore, the third broth. This one stopped me in my tracks the first time I tasted it. Sarah calls it fish bruje. Fish head broth, made from the heads, spines, and tails of whatever cold water fish her grandsons bring back from a trip up to the Susquehanna. Trout, bass, sometimes a whole salmon if a relative drives some down from a market in Lancaster City. Fish head broth contains marine collagen, which research has shown absorbs into the bloodstream faster than bovine or chicken collagen because the peptide chains are shorter. It's also rich in iodine, selenium, and the omega-3 fats that boxed broths contain almost none of. Sarah simmers hers for only about 4 hours with a knob of ginger and a few peppercorns because fish bones release their gelatin quickly and turn bitter if cooked too long. The result is a clear golden liquid with a clean ocean smell. Her husband Amish drinks a mug of it every morning before he walks out to the dairy barn. He's 78. His hands don't shake. But the broth that surprised me most was the fourth one. Let me walk you through how this one lives in Sarah's kitchen, because describing it as a recipe doesn't capture what's really happening. Into a heavy enamel pot goes a pile of chicken backs and necks, the parts most American shoppers leave behind at the meat counter. Around them goes a bundle of fresh parsley stems, 2 yellow onions left in their papery skins, a handful of garlic cloves with the husks still on, and a long pour of raw apple cider vinegar from a jug Sarah keeps in the pantry. Cold spring water covers everything by about 2 inches. The pot sits on the back corner of the wood stove where the heat is gentlest, and it stays there for 2 full days. The lid rests slightly ajar, letting steam escape so the liquid concentrates. By the second morning, the kitchen smells like a memory most of us haven't had since childhood. The bones have gone soft enough to crumble between 2 fingers. The liquid has reduced by nearly half. What pours through Sarah's cheesecloth is the color of dark amber, and when it cools in mason jars on the cellar shelf, it sets so firm you could slice it with a knife. This is the broth she gave Margaret. My wife drank a cup of it warmed each morning for 6 months. The orthopedist in Harrisburg looked at her follow-up imaging and asked her what she'd been doing. Margaret told him. He wrote nothing down. That was the moment I understood that what we're losing isn't just recipes. It's a whole way of treating our bodies that the people who profit from our chronic illness would prefer we never recover. The supplement aisle at the pharmacy generates billions of dollars a year selling collagen powder to women whose grandmothers had a pot of the real thing on the stove every single week. The Amish never had that aisle. They never needed it. Johns Hopkins researchers have spent 50 years documenting that plain communities in Lancaster and Holmes County show measurably lower rates of the inflammatory joint diseases that put the rest of us on prescription medications by 65. They eat differently. They cook differently. The broth in the pot is part of why. But I promised you a 5th broth. The one Sarah swore me to share carefully because she said most outsiders won't believe it works until they've tried it themselves. She calls it Knuckle bruje, marrow bone broth. But the way she makes it is different from anything you'll find in a cookbook. She takes beef marrow bones, cut crosswise so the marrow is exposed, and she roasts them first in a hot oven until the marrow turns golden and fragrant. Then, those roasted bones go into the pot with cold water, a splash of vinegar, and one ingredient I had never seen anyone add to broth in my life: eggshells. Clean, dried, crushed eggshells from her own hens, saved in a jar by the sink for exactly this purpose. The eggshells release calcium carbonate and trace minerals slowly into the broth as it simmers, the vinegar pulling them into solution along with the marrow's iron, vitamin K2, and the deep collagen locked inside the bone shaft. After 30 hours of slow extraction, what comes out of the pot is a broth so mineral dense that Sarah's mother used to give a small cup of it to women recovering from childbirth, to elderly people whose bones had grown brittle, and to children who weren't growing the way they should. That's the broth Lancaster drank. That's the broth almost nobody outside these communities knows about. And it costs roughly $2 to make a quart at home, using bones your butcher will often give you for free if you ask, and eggshells you were already throwing in the trash this morning. I think about that sometimes. How much we throw away. How much our great-grandmothers would have stared at us in disbelief if they'd seen us scraping eggshells into a garbage can while we drove to a vitamin store to buy calcium pills. Margaret keeps a pot going on our stove now most weeks. She says her knees haven't ached since the second winter. She's 65 this year. She walks the back pasture with me at sunrise, the way her own grandmother walked her farm in Lebanon County until the day she died at 91. This isn't magic. It isn't a miracle. It's just what the women before us knew, written down in nobody's book, kept alive in farmhouse kitchens by the kind of patient hands that don't need a label to tell them what's real. If your grandmother kept a stock pot on her stove, I want you to tell me about it in the comments below. What did she put in it? What state was she in? What did your kitchen smell like on a Sunday morning when you were 8 years old? Tell me. I read every one. And if you're ready to keep recovering what was taken from us, the practical wisdom of women who never needed a pharmacy aisle, subscribe and stay close. Next week, I'm taking you into a Holmes County cellar to show you the fermented carrot recipe that the Amish have been giving children with weak digestion for over a century. You won't find it in any cookbook printed after 1930. I'll see you there.